February 28, 2026, the world awoke to breaking news. Israel and the United States had launched coordinated strikes deep inside Iran. The air was thick with uncertainty as explosions rocked Tehran and the region braced for the unknown. Maps flashed across global news screens, highlighting the targeted zones and signaling the start of a crisis that would soon engulf the Middle East. The initial shockwaves were felt not just in Iran but across neighboring countries as people tried to make sense of the sudden escalation. This was not just another skirmish, it was the beginning of a conflict that would have far-reaching consequences. As the dust settled, reports confirmed that Israel had executed decapitation strikes aimed at Iran's top leadership. Simultaneously, U.S. forces targeted key military infrastructure, crippling Iran's ability to coordinate a swift response. The leadership vacuum in Tehran was immediate and profound, leaving the country's command structure in disarray. Red targets appeared on digital maps, and headlines flashed with updates as the world watched the unfolding drama. The coordinated nature of these attacks demonstrated a new level of military precision, setting the stage for a rapid escalation. Iran's response was swift and fierce. Within hours, missile and airstrikes rained down across Israel and several Gulf states. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz sent shockwaves through global markets, as vital oil tanker routes were suddenly blocked. The world watched anxiously as energy prices spiked and fears of a prolonged conflict grew. The escalation was no longer confined to military targets, it now threatened the stability of the entire region and the global economy. Stakes had never been higher. Conflict quickly spread beyond the initial combatants. From Bahrain to Saudi Arabia, civilian populations faced mounting fear and uncertainty. Refugee flows surged as families fled violence, seeking safety wherever they could. Economic shockwaves rippled through the region with currencies collapsing and markets in turmoil. The humanitarian crisis deepened by the day as aid organizations struggled to keep up with the growing needs. The war's impact was no longer just military, it was deeply personal for millions. As news of the conflict spread, protests erupted in cities around the globe. People took to the streets demanding peace and accountability. Governments convened emergency meetings to debate sanctions and possible interventions. The United Nations called for urgent action, urging all sides to respect international law and protect civilians. Flashing headlines and images of protest crowds became a daily fixture, underscoring the global concern over the escalating crisis. The world was watching and reacting. Israel-Iran war was no longer just a regional conflict. Its consequences rippled across continents, affecting security, energy supplies, and the lives of ordinary people everywhere. The crisis forced a reckoning with the fragility of global systems and the interconnectedness of nations. As maps, protests, and oil barrels flashed across screens, the world was left to grapple with the hidden fallout of a war that had changed everything. The story was far from over. In the immediate aftermath of the strikes, Tehran was a city transformed. Streets once bustling with daily life were now eerily quiet, punctuated by the sounds of emergency vehicles and distant explosions. The population grappled with fear and confusion, unsure of what the next day would bring. Government buildings stood damaged and rumors swirled about the fate of key leaders. The sense of vulnerability was palpable, as citizens sought information and reassurance in a rapidly changing environment. Top Iranian leaders targeted, the country faced a sudden leadership vacuum. Decision-making slowed as remaining officials scrambled to re-establish control. The uncertainty at the top filtered down, affecting military responses and civilian morale alike. International observers noted the chaos, warning that such instability could lead to unpredictable outcomes. The world watched closely, aware that the next moves in Tehran could determine the trajectory of the entire conflict. U.S. strikes focused on crippling Iran's military infrastructure. Airbases, communication hubs, and missile sites were among the primary targets. The destruction of these assets severely limited Iran's ability to coordinate defenses or launch counterattacks. Satellite images revealed the extent of the damage, while military analysts debated the long-term impact on Iran's strategic capabilities. The strikes were a calculated effort to weaken Iran's military posture for the foreseeable future. As news of the strikes spread, uncertainty gripped Tehran. Residents lined up at stores to stock up on essentials, fearing further attacks or supply shortages. Social media buzzed with speculation and unverified reports, adding to the anxiety. The government struggled to maintain order, issuing statements aimed at calming the population. Yet the sense of unease persisted as everyone waited for the next development in a rapidly evolving crisis. Iran's missile launches were both a show of strength and a signal of intent. The skies above Israel and the Gulf states lit up as missiles streaked toward their targets. Air defense systems scrambled to intercept incoming threats while civilians sought shelter. The world watched live footage, aware that each missile could escalate the conflict further. The balance of power in the region was shifting before everyone's eyes. Closure of the Strait of Hormuz was a turning point. As one of the world's most critical oil choke points, its blockade sent oil prices soaring and triggered panic in global markets. Oil tankers were rerouted or stranded, and energy companies scrambled to assess the impact. The move demonstrated Iran's ability to disrupt global trade, raising fears of a prolonged economic crisis if the strait remained closed. Energy markets reacted instantly to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Traders scrambled to adjust positions and governments released strategic reserves to stabilize prices. The volatility underscored the world's dependence on Middle Eastern oil and the vulnerability of global supply chains. As uncertainty persisted, businesses and consumers braced for higher costs and potential shortages. Conflict spread to Gulf states like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, heightened regional tensions. Governments increased security measures while citizens faced curfews and travel restrictions. The threat of further attacks loomed large and daily life was disrupted as people adjusted to the new reality. The region's stability, already fragile, was now under unprecedented strain. As violence intensified, waves of refugees crossed borders seeking safety. Camps sprang up overnight, straining resources in humanitarian aid efforts. Families were separated, and stories of hardship spread quickly. The displacement crisis added a new layer of complexity to an already volatile situation as neighboring countries struggled to cope with the influx. Economic impact of the war was immediate and severe. Stock markets tumbled, currencies lost value, and businesses faced uncertainty. In affected countries, inflation soared as basic goods became scarce. The ripple effects extended far beyond the region, with global markets reacting to every new development. The world economy was now entangled in the conflict's fallout. International aid organizations mobilized quickly to address the growing humanitarian crisis. Emergency supplies were rushed to affected areas, and medical teams set up field hospitals. Despite these efforts, the scale of need was overwhelming. Aid workers faced dangerous conditions, and access to some regions remained limited. The world's attention turned to the plight of civilians caught in the crossfire. News outlets provided round-the-clock coverage of the conflict. Journalists reported from the front lines, sharing stories of survival and loss. Social media amplified these reports, spreading information and sometimes misinformation at lightning speed. The constant flow of updates kept the world engaged, but also contributed to a sense of anxiety and urgency. Diplomatic channels sprang into action as world leaders sought to de-escalate the crisis. Emergency meetings were held at the United Nations, and envoys traveled between capitals to broker ceasefires. Despite these efforts, progress was slow and mistrust ran deep. The diplomatic struggle underscored the complexity of resolving such a multifaceted conflict. As the conflict raged, governments debated imposing new sanctions on Iran and its allies. Economic measures were seen as a way to pressure parties into negotiations, but also risked worsening the humanitarian crisis. The debate highlighted the difficult balance between punishing aggression and protecting civilians. United Nations issued urgent calls for accountability, demanding that all parties respect international law and protect civilians. Investigations were launched into alleged war crimes, and human rights organizations documented abuses. The international community faced the challenge of enforcing norms in the midst of chaos. War exposed vulnerabilities in global energy security. Countries dependent on Middle Eastern oil scrambled to find alternative sources, while energy companies reevaluated supply routes. The crisis prompted renewed discussions about energy independence and the risks of over-reliance on any single region. Financial markets around the world experienced extreme volatility. Investors reacted to each new development, and central banks intervened to stabilize currencies. The uncertainty made long-term planning difficult for businesses and governments alike, as everyone waited for signs of resolution. Amid the chaos, individual stories of resilience and loss emerged. Families recounted harrowing escapes while communities banded together to support one another. These personal narratives brought a human face to the conflict, reminding the world of the real cost of war. Aid convoys became lifelines for besieged communities. Volunteers risked their lives to deliver food, water, and medical supplies. The journeys were perilous, often interrupted by fighting or roadblocks, yet the determination of aid workers provided hope in the darkest moments. Oil prices surged to record highs as the conflict disrupted supply. Consumers felt the impact at the pump, and industries reliant on energy faced rising costs. The price spike underscored the global economy's sensitivity to Middle Eastern instability. Social media played a pivotal role in shaping perceptions of the conflict. Hashtags trended worldwide, and viral videos brought the war into living rooms across the globe. While these platforms helped spread awareness, they also fueled misinformation and deepened divisions. For many, the journey to safety was long and uncertain. Refugees traveled by foot, car, and boat, facing dangers at every turn. Border crossings were crowded and resources scarce, yet hope persisted as families pressed on, determined to find refuge from the violence. International mediators worked tirelessly to broker a ceasefire. Negotiations were tense, with each side demanding concessions. The process was slow, but the stakes were high. Every day without peace meant more lives lost and greater instability. Sanctions imposed during the conflict had far-reaching effects. Iranian businesses struggled to operate, and ordinary citizens faced shortages of essential goods. The sanctions debate continued as policymakers weighed their effectiveness against the humanitarian toll. Human rights organizations deployed monitors to document abuses and advocate for victims. Their reports provided crucial evidence for international investigations and kept the spotlight on civilian suffering. The work was dangerous but vital for accountability. The crisis accelerated the search for alternative energy sources. Countries invested in renewables and diversified supply chains to reduce dependence on Middle Eastern oil. The shift was gradual, but the urgency was clear. Energy security had become a top priority. In many countries, communities organized solidarity events to support those affected by the war. Fundraisers, vigils, and awareness campaigns brought people together across borders. the outpouring of empathy was a reminder of the world's shared humanity. Oil supply chains were tested as companies rerouted shipments and sought new partners. The disruptions highlighted the complexity of global trade and the challenges of maintaining stable energy flows during conflict. Governments around the world increased security at critical infrastructure sites. Airports, ports, and energy facilities were placed on high alert. The heightened vigilance reflected fears of further attacks or sabotage. Civil society groups mobilized to provide support and advocate for peace. From legal aid to trauma counseling, their efforts filled gaps left by governments and international agencies. The grassroots response was a testament to the resilience of ordinary people. Children were among the most vulnerable in the conflict. Schools closed and many lost access to basic services. Aid organizations prioritized child protection, but the scale of the crisis made it difficult to reach everyone in need. Both sides engaged in information warfare, using propaganda and cyberattacks to influence public opinion and disrupt enemy operations. The digital battlefield became as important as the physical one, shaping perceptions and strategies. The conflict raised urgent questions about international law. Legal experts debated the legitimacy of the strikes and the responsibilities of warring parties. The challenge of enforcing norms in wartime became a central issue for policymakers and advocates. The war reignited debates about energy independence. Policymakers argued for increased investment in domestic energy sources and reduced reliance on imports. The crisis served as a wake-up call for countries to rethink their energy strategies. Humanitarian law became a focal point as reports of civilian casualties mounted. International agencies reminded all parties of their obligations to protect non-combatants and provide aid. The conflict tested the limits of these legal frameworks. Oil choke points like the Strait of Hormuz became household terms as their strategic importance was thrust into the spotlight. The vulnerability of these narrow passages underscored the risks facing global energy flows during times of conflict. Sanctions policy became a central tool of international response. Policymakers weighed the effectiveness of sanctions in achieving political goals versus their humanitarian impact. The debate reflected broader questions about the ethics and utility of economic pressure. The war highlighted the reality of global interdependence. Events in one region had immediate consequences for people and economies worldwide. The crisis served as a powerful reminder that no country is truly isolated in today's interconnected world. As the dust began to settle, analysts and policymakers reflected on the lessons of the Israel-Iran war. The conflict revealed vulnerabilities in global systems, the importance of diplomacy, and the enduring human cost of war. The hidden fallout would shape international relations, energy policy, and humanitarian efforts for years to come.